The pandemic had been raging on for nearly a year, and people were starting to lose hope. Despite the constant stream of dire news, life went on as normally as it could. People went to work, went to the grocery store, and tried to maintain a sense of normalcy. But for one family, everything changed on a fateful trip to the grocery store. They had been careful, wearing masks and gloves, but somehow, they still managed to contract the virus. At first, it seemed like a mild case. The parents had some mild symptoms, but their son, who was only 5 years old, seemed to be unaffected. But as the days went on, the son's condition began to deteriorate. He became feverish and delirious, and no matter what the doctors did, they couldn't seem to bring his temperature down. As the family watched their son slip away, they couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. They had heard rumors of people becoming something other than human after contracting the virus, and they couldn't shake the feeling that their son was changing into something unnatural. One night, as the parents sat by their son's bedside, they were startled awake by a loud noise. They rushed to the boy's room to find him standing at the foot of his bed, his eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. Before they could even react, the boy lunged at them, his teeth bared. It was then that they realized the full horror of what was happening. Their son was no longer human. He had become a monster, driven by the virus that had taken over his body. The parents fled the house, leaving their son behind as they ran for their lives. They knew that they couldn't fight the monster that their son had become, and they could only hope that he would be contained before he could spread the virus to anyone else. As they fled through the empty streets, they couldn't help but wonder how many other families were facing the same terrible fate. The pandemic had taken so much already, and now, it seemed that it was taking even more. The world had become a place of darkness and fear, and there seemed to be no end in sight. The parents stumbled through the deserted streets, their hearts pounding in their chests. They had no idea where they were going, they just knew that they had to get as far away from their son as possible. As they ran, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. They could hear the sound of footsteps behind them, but whenever they turned around, there was no one there. Finally, they reached the edge of town and collapsed in a heap, panting and gasping for air. They had no idea what to do next. They couldn't go back to their son, but they couldn't just abandon him either. As they sat there, trying to catch their breath, they heard a voice behind them. "Are you okay?" They turned to see a kind-faced woman standing a few feet away. She was wearing a mask and gloves, and she had a look of concern on her face. "We need help," the mother gasped. "Our son, he's sick. He's not himself anymore." The woman nodded sympathetically. "I understand," she said. "I've heard of cases like this. But don't worry, we can help him. We have a place where we can take care of people who have been affected by the virus." The parents looked at each other, hope dawning in their eyes. Maybe there was a way to save their son after all. They followed the woman to a nearby building, where they were met by a team of medical professionals. They were rushed into a sterile room, where their son was given the best care possible. As the days went by, the boy's condition began to improve. The virus was still present in his body, but it was no longer controlling his actions. He was able to return to his normal self, and the parents were filled with gratitude and relief. They knew that their son would always carry the mark of the virus with him, but they were just grateful to have him back. And as they left the treatment facility and returned home, they vowed to do everything in their power to make sure that no one else would have to suffer the way that they had. As the family settled back into their normal routine, they couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. They had been through so much with the virus and their son's transformation, and it seemed like the worst was behind them. But one night, as they were sitting down to dinner, they heard a knock on the door. The father went to answer it, and what he saw made his blood run cold. It was a group of their neighbors, but they were no longer human. Their eyes were glowing with an otherworldly light, and their skin was pale and waxy. They were zombies, controlled by the virus that had taken over their bodies. The father tried to slam the door shut, but it was too late. The zombies had already entered the house, and they were coming for the family. The parents grabbed their son and fled, running through the dark streets as the zombies gave chase. They had no idea where they were going, they just knew that they had to keep moving. As they ran, they could hear the moans and groans of the zombies behind them, getting closer and closer with each passing second. They knew that they couldn't outrun them forever, and they started to lose hope. Just when they thought all was lost, they saw a glimmer of light in the distance. It was a military checkpoint, and they could see soldiers armed with rifles standing guard. The parents shouted for help, and the soldiers rushed to their aid. They fought off the zombies, using their weapons and training to keep the family safe. As the dawn broke and the last of the zombies were defeated, the family was finally able to catch their breath. They were safe, at least for now. But as they looked at the devastation around them, they knew that this was only the beginning. The virus was still out there, and it was only a matter of time before it struck again. They vowed to stay vigilant and do everything in their power to protect themselves and their loved ones from the horrors of the pandemic. The family was grateful to be alive, but they knew that they couldn't stay at the military checkpoint forever. They needed a plan, a way to ensure their safety in a world that was becoming more and more dangerous by the day. After much discussion, they decided to join a community of survivors that had formed on the outskirts of town. It was a risky move, but they knew that they would have a better chance of surviving if they were part of a group. The community was made up of people from all walks of life, united by their desire to survive. They worked together to build shelters, grow food, and defend themselves against the zombies that roamed the land. The family quickly settled into their new life, and for a time, it seemed like things were finally starting to look up. They had food, shelter, and most importantly, they had each other. But as the months went by, the family began to notice strange behavior among some of the community members. They were distant and disconnected, and they seemed to be losing their humanity. The parents were worried, and they knew that they had to do something before it was too late. They decided to leave the community and strike out on their own, hoping to find a place where they could live in peace. They packed up their belongings and set off into the unknown, determined to find a safe haven. They knew that it wouldn't be easy, but they were willing to do whatever it took to survive. As they walked, they held on to each other and hoped for the best. They knew that they were strong, and that they could overcome any obstacle as long as they were together. And with that thought in mind, they pressed on, into the unknown future.